As everyone knows, because I can't shut up about it, the 2016 Boom main ongoing comic series, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, ended this past summer with the finale event, Darkest Hour, in a very, not so good way. But regardless of my feelings, and regardless of its quality, it's done, and we've officially kickstarted the new era of Power Rangers comics with Power Rangers Prime, a completely new universe compared by Boom itself to the Marvel Ultimate series, where the show's events don't necessarily have to be followed. The toys are out of the box, and we can play with them how we want. And that's exciting, I guess. The series has only released 2 issues and a preview for the 3rd, so there's a lot of stuff about it up in the air, and it's really too early to theorize about where it's going or what it wants to be. But I figure we can end out the year with a little ramble about how I feel about it, as it turns out I feel some things about it. So, for those who haven't read it, basically we're being dropped into 2024 of a completely new Power Rangers Earth. 70 years ago, Eltarians came to help the Samurai Power Rangers fight off an enemy called the Beast Brigade, in what's apparently the first time aliens have made contact with humans, but afterwards decided to stay and impose fascism as a way to advance the planet. As part of this oppressive regime, they've been hunting down Power Rangers, where we begin our story of Lauren, the Red Samurai Ranger, yes, that Lauren, being chased and rescued by Mark, a half-Aquitian refugee, and his roommate Orion, an Andresian refugee. Yes, that Orion. Super Mega Force Orion. We'll get to that. Other characters include June, an Eltarian born on Earth who witnesses the rescue, his friends Ryan of the VR Troopers, yes, that Ryan and those VR Troopers. We will also get to that. And Ryan's girlfriend Valentina. As I said, of this video, there have only been 2 issues officially released, so the only real story progression we've gotten is Rita, yes, that Rita, landing in Angel Grove in her space dumpster and emerging from it to explore this new world, the team slowly coming together to help Lauren break her family out of prison, and Ryan catching wind of it all and gearing up to capture Lauren with the rest of the VR troopers. So, right off the bat, it's pretty easy to see what they're going for with this new cast. We've already gotten their new suits via number 5's cover, and while they haven't gotten their powers in the story itself yet, it's pretty easy to tie a character to a color. Lauren is red, of course, Mark is blue, June is black, Valentina is yellow, and Orion is pink. It's probably also not a coincidence that Rita is mostly in white. Solicits imply she'll be the one to give them their powers, and following that logic, we're pretty much all but guaranteed to get a green one day. Because as much as this series bragged in the advertising that it's not held down by MMPR, it is very clearly held down by MMPR, at least at this point. The color scheme, the powers, reusing the story element of Eltarians being an oppressive regime from the 2016 series. Rita is here, Bulk is here, the setting is Angel Grove. It kind of makes you wonder why not just make the new cast alternate versions of the original MMPRs rather than a bunch of OCs with random show characters sprinkled in. Heck, we kept showing off how Lauren is getting a new alternate version of her samurai suit, but now she's clearly going to swap that out for this new MMPR red-based one, however that ends up working. I'm guessing the actual MMPRs not showing up is part of the point. We haven't gotten any mention of Zordon yet, so who knows if he's in the tube or not. But for someone like me who genuinely loves the originals as characters, setting up a world where we're using MMPR's aesthetics, but giving them all to other people, just makes me miss the actual MMPRs and want them here, rather than these OCs. I really wish they could have been wholly original suits like Ranger Academy, or use an unadapted Sentai like Power Rangers Universe did. The suits do seem to be using alternate animals for the powers at the very least, outside of Red, who of course is still a T-Rex, but it just seems very bare minimum breakaway from MMPR. We couldn't even let Orion be silver like how we let Lauren keep red, or why not just let the entire team be alternate Samurai Rangers? It's only been 2 issues, but the series was honestly building up Samurai as the primary defenders of Earth, and obviously Lauren is here with her Samuraiser, but are we going to end up ditching that for Temu MMPR? Is Jaden gonna get the Red Samurai Ranger powers again? Of course, no matter what powers we use, I just wish the show team was here instead, but still, it just seems like a waste to me to once again fall back on alternate MMPR suits when we've already had Many of those. But moving on to the cast themselves, as of now, June is probably the most interesting to me, as his setup is one that allows for the most depth as an Eltarian who agrees with the colonization of Earth out of loyalty to his people, but secretly admires the Power Rangers for whatever reason. Though part of me can't help but worry that he'll end up being a retread of Candace from the 2016 series, an Eltarian who eventually has to unlearn the propaganda of their people and join up with the non-Eltarian heroes against them, only without the romantic part of Candace's story, because obviously romance is only for girls. And speaking of romance only being for girls, Valentina unfortunately already falls into the same trap that plagued the girls in Darkest Hour. Her primary motivation is romantic in nature, as the girlfriend of the leader of the VR troopers, which will no doubt lead into drama with them ending up on opposite sides. And yeah, she's also got her tough girl who fights side too, which is honestly so low-hanging fruit for a Power Rangers character that I can't even pretend to be impressed by it. But at least she also has something of an arc set up along with June. Lauren is basically Lauren of the show, being most concerned about her family right now. Mark and Orion are probably tied for the least interesting, unfortunately. Mark clearly has some kind of dark past as a half-Aquitian refugee, and he has a good enough heart to hide Lauren when she's on the run from Eltarians. But beyond that, he's just kind of a typical smart, slightly reserved Blue Ranger boy who, while bold enough to call out the colonization of Earth as bad while in class run by an Eltarian teacher, he's pretty forgiving of being called a slur to his face. And Orion, well, Orion's an interesting case. So as I mentioned, like Lauren, Orion is a show character being adapted into this story, the Orion from Super Megaforce. Besides him resembling his actor, he mentions being an Andresian refugee with nothing to go back to, and jokes about loving froyos. But outside of this, I have nothing really to say about him, because I don't know what more can be done with him. Though I do have a horrible feeling that we're setting up some kind of romance between him and Lauren. Oh god, no. So what makes this interesting is they specifically chose to make this canon show ranger part of the main cast, rather than just making it all OCs, and they did that by basically stripping his storyline from the show. See, Orion is one of the few Megaforce Rangers that has a fleshed out backstory and motivation. His planet was destroyed by the Armada, and he joins up with the Megaforce Rangers to avenge his people with the legendary Silver Morpher and Key he had previously found. But here in Prime, he establishes that in this timeline, he's already been on Earth for 10 years, with no key to be found, and no mention of the Armada. We'll see what happens further down the line, but he seems to have moved past any vengeance he might have wanted. He's honestly being set up as the comic relief, the goofy, fun-loving guy who doesn't really seem to have a drop of vengeance in his body. Now, on the one hand, there's some potential to this, exploring characters outside of their major show storylines, but at the same time, why choose these characters as your show rep if you take out the storylines that make them recognizable and interesting? Why not just make the whole cast OCs, basically doing what Power Rangers Universe did? In summary, what is the point of using Orion beyond fan service? He doesn't even get to be a Silver Ranger with the Prime suits, because if we do a color scheme outside of the MMPRs, we'll die, I guess. The same thing kind of extends to Lauren, even if she has more in common with her counterpart, narrative-wise, with her family being so important to her. And there's some kind of story reason for including her, as the altered history implies Samurai Rangers were the main defenders of this Earth, even if she hasn't mentioned Nilox or Master Xandred. However, Lauren is mostly known in the show for having spent her entire life training in the specific symbol power technique to banish Xandred, until ultimately she fails due to him finding an unprecedented protection in absorbing Dayu. People always point towards Samurai doing Lauren dirty, and while they're right in some ways, I don't think Lauren failing is inherently a bad character choice. In fact, I'd argue that Lauren failing is what makes her so interesting and memorable. She's a genuinely tragic character, a very specific kind of tragedy that comes from her entire life being dedicated to one action that, because of unforeseen circumstances that aren't her fault, she can't complete. Her entire character and narrative is built on this, and it's very unique to Power Rangers. So when you take that away, who is she? Just the archetype red girl boss? Is this even Lauren? Are you going to force me to watch her and Orion fall in love rather than grapple with failure and the burden of family legacy? I guess it's this whole feeling of wanting to have their cake and eat it too that bugs me a bit. Like, they want to take risks, but they don't actually take those risks very far. Samurai and Megaforce are very disliked seasons in the fandom, and it would have been fun to give the spotlight to members of these casts that get overshadowed by negative reception of their seasons, and maybe turn people around to them. But instead, we're going with the easy fan favorites, ones who are already liked and had already gotten time to shine in the comics in the case of Lauren, who had a pretty major role in Shattered Grid. So I worry that any other appearances from other show characters will follow that formula. There's been talk that a Jungle Fury character is slated to appear, but frankly, I'll be very shocked if it's not RJ or even Lily. And yes, I'll say it doesn't help matters that all of these characters are white people. We have 3 white blonde members of the major cast. What are we doing? I don't agree with people who act like the comics have to be 100% one-to-one with the show. I think it's great when the comics take liberty with the source material. MMPR The Return is by far my favorite series Boom has put out, and I love the Coinless universe. And in general, I like the idea of a Marvel's Ultimate-style reimagining for Power Rangers. But I guess my issue here is the canon characters used will end up feeling like OCs with the skins of canon characters laid on top, rather than explorations of these canon characters, which is especially awkward when the characters chosen aren't blank slates that you can do anything with, which again you could argue the casts of Samurai and Megaforce are. They're the fan favorites with detailed histories and personalities, and changing them will make them entirely different characters. I remember when everyone hated how Beyond the Grid made Cam goofy, and all the theories that he was Cyber Cam. And for what it's worth, Prime choosing fan favorites to focus on isn't entirely isolated. This has been something Boom has done for years. See how pretty much all of their Time Force stuff focused on Jen. But I guess it's just slightly more annoying here because of how they came out swinging with bragging about how they aren't limited to the seasons and characters they can use, and the ones they have used are Lauren and Rita. Groundbreaking. At least Orion is somewhat of a unique choice. The problem is just that we have a blonde white guy named Orion, and then another white blonde guy named Ryan, with the main difference between them design-wise being that one guy has his hair back and another has loose bangs. I'm gonna mix them up so much. Speaking of Ryan, VR Troopers! Obviously, the biggest news surrounding this series has been the inclusion of the VR Troopers in official Power Rangers media for the first time ever, and this is super whatever to me. I've never seen VR Troopers, though I suppose I'll have to at this point. And while I can understand the excitement from its fans, it's just not hitting me like that. Because of that, I don't really have much to say about their inclusion beyond the fact that I'm not sure why people haven't picked up on the fact they're clearly bad guys in this timeline, or at the very least foils to the Rangers. They're literally fascist police. I wonder how that's going to affect people's excitement about their inclusion once they get more involved in the plot, along with how much actual VR Trooper stuff we're going to see besides the 3 main troopers, as the end of the second issue did seem to confirm that the other 2 are Caitlin and JB. Wasn't their villain some kind of CEO with a cyber dimension army? Are we going to see that guy here? And I think there was, like, a talking dog? Orion and Mark have a pet dog. Is he gonna start talking or what? It's difficult to explain, but Prime is in an odd state of limbo to me. It's been stated many times to be the new main series, basically a reboot of the Boom brand, but it doesn't feel like it. It honestly feels like a side series more than a main series. Like it's another instance of a filler book until we get to the actual new main series. And I suppose it's just a matter of getting used to a new status quo after following the 2016 storyline for 8 years. But I think a lot of it also comes from how the 2016's ending could barely be considered final, ending so openly on Billy alone, swearing to fix the grid, and no follow-up on anyone else, not even a panel of, like, Tommy and Kim married, or the coinless inhabitants fixing their world, or whatever. So you naturally assume that the next series would build off of that in some way. I've seen plenty of theories that Prime's world formed out of Billy breaking the grid, maybe with the Eltarian oppression being an instance of, what if in this timeline Eltarian succeeded in taking over Earth in Eltarian War? Or even that this entire reality is fake, supported by the inclusion of the VR, aka virtual reality, troopers. And in all fairness, that could easily be a twist waiting to be revealed down the line. We still know very little about this series. Based on the advertising, though, they seem pretty definitive about it being a completely new thing, like with the mentioned comparisons to Marvel's Ultimate and DC's Absolute universes. So I'm not sure if a connection to the 2016 series is guaranteed, even if they're clearly taking inspiration from it. Rita, as she appears here, seems like a completely new Rita and not, say, the Rita from the 2016 series finally emerging from the dumpster she exiled herself to in Darkest Hour. The Eltarians in this world took over the Earth in 1954 after an attack by the Beast Brigade, rather than the vague 2010s of the previous series to help against the Imperials, and the implication seems to be that the Samurai Rangers were Earth's only Power Rangers until then because of no Zordon or MMPRs, though we'll have to see what's revealed from this Ranger artifact exhibit thing in issue 3, as a broken Triceratops coin can be seen in the previews. And of course we know their suits are some variation of MMPR. So obviously it's far too early to make a definitive judgment on it. I know a lot of this has sounded negative, but it's really just me being cautious after 2 years of this same author's writing. It might sound kinda mean, but I feel I'd be more lenient if it was a different author, and thus allowed for more of a fresh start and new surprises from a new perspective on the franchise. Meanwhile, here I'm already seeing the flaws from Darkest Hour slowly creep in. And it kind of gave me a bad first impression since I never liked the Eltarians are evil twist from the 2016 series, and I'm not happy to see it recycled here. But obviously I'll be sticking with it. I really ended up enjoying Ranger Academy after an unsure start, and maybe I'll end up being surprised along the way here. But please, can we give Valentina something that doesn't have to do with her boyfriend? I'm still hurt by what happened to Aisha. I can't see that repeated, please.